That morning, as he stepped into the familiar 11-story glass building, no one looked up to greet him like they used to. Eyes that once exchanged knowing nods now darted away, cold and evasive. No one needed to say anything. The air had already spoken. On the sixth floor, where the technical department hid behind an ivory-colored soundproof wall, the door to the HR director's office was cracked open. A soft yellow glow spilled out, illuminating a pair of polished shoes tapping impatiently. Charles stepped inside, and there sat Lena Moore, head of HR. Beside her was Richard, the newly appointed COO, nearly 20 years his junior, always wearing that look like he'd invented technology out of thin air. "Charles, the company is restructuring," Richard said flatly, as if reading from a quarterly report. "We have to eliminate several roles, including yours, effective immediately." No thank you, no apology, not even a glance of regret. He didn't ask why, didn't flinch. His only response was a single nod to confirm he'd heard. After nearly 2 decades at Trident Systems, a man learns to read the weather, even when the sky's clear. He stood, left without a word. Behind him were 2 people he once considered teammates, though never quite friends. Back in his department, a few younger staff were typing. One of them quickly shut his screen and stared at his keyboard as if it had whispered a secret. They had all been trained by him, taught line by line how to build the very architecture they now worked inside. They knew him, but now they avoided his gaze like he carried bad news. He opened his desk drawer and took out an old photo. His wife's radiant smile captured on their 10th anniversary in Monterey Bay. A lopsided ceramic mug painted by his daughter in 4th grade, which he used every morning. A small succulent that had somehow survived 17 years under cold LED light. He packed them gently, as if each item was a relic from a time others wanted to erase. As he closed his laptop and stood, Kara, from accounting, who often brought him coffee when systems crashed, hurried over. "Charles, I just heard. I can't believe it. After everything you've done." He smiled faintly, shook his head. "It's okay. They want change." She froze. Her eyes welled. Not knowing what else to say, he placed a hand on her shoulder. His quiet goodbye. As he walked toward the elevator, he saw Richard standing by the window, staring down at the lot below. Richard turned just as Charles passed. No words, no gesture, just standing there like a guard, making sure he left without causing a scene. Charles walked out of Trident Systems, the place where he'd started when it was just a row of leased offices in Houston. Back then, he was 37, fresh from a smaller firm in Austin with a kindergartner at home. Now he was 54 with gray streaks in his hair. Elaine, his wife, was planning early retirement. That little boy had become a legal intern at a major law firm. This wasn't just a job. It had been his life. Late nights solving failures, lines of code written in languages no one else bothered to learn. He set his access badge on the security desk. The guard looked at him, then gave a small nod, the first sincere look he'd received all day. He wasn't angry or hurt, just hollow, as if the entire building had exhaled as he stepped outside. But one thing was certain. The people who'd pushed him out had no idea what was waiting for them. He unlocked his car, started the engine, and took one last look at the place he'd given nearly 20 years. Wednesday was going to be interesting. The car glided silently down I-45, heading south, away from downtown Houston. In the cabin, his phone stayed powered off, his bag quiet beneath the passenger seat. No calls, no messages. None from the team he once led. But that didn't matter. He still had something they forgot he possessed. He hadn't taken a single document from the office. But years ago, he had built a layered access tracking system for internal investigations. Back when CEO Martha was accused of concealing investment expenses, legal asked him to create a system to log every digital financial action. He didn't just build it. He made it a shell that wrapped around Trident's entire technical framework. Once the project was done, everyone moved on, except him. Back home, Elaine asked one question. "What did they do to you?" He didn't answer, just kissed her on the cheek and walked into his study. From beneath the desk, He opened a safe and pulled out 3 encrypted hard drives he'd kept secure for over a decade. He plugged in the first one, typed a complex password he had to pause to recall. The screen lit up. The data appeared, untouched. He browsed through 18 months of internal access logs, lines of code, system edits, privilege changes. Several entries stood out, ones he'd spotted 3 months ago, the day he noticed he no longer had clearance to manage core systems. It had happened gradually, piece by piece, like they were testing his response. He didn't react, he documented. Inside the folder labeled auth_activity_1, he found the name Corey Duncan, one of the newer engineers, granted elevated permissions just weeks after being hired. Unusual. Those credentials were previously reserved for only him and one department head. Who had approved it? The answer? Richard Nelson, the new COO. Just as expected. He jumped to the internal meeting logs. He used to be a permanent seat at those tables for 12 straight years. In the past 6 weeks, not a single invite had reached his inbox. They'd cut him out of every key discussion, yet left his name on project boards to avoid suspicion from staff. They'd erased him from inside the system, pretending he never existed. Near midnight, he opened the folder OPSEC_backup, where he kept the entire architecture of the internal payment gateway, security certificates, and user authentication protocols. Every patch, every VPN route, a blueprint of Trident, along with the digital keys. Anyone who assumed firing him would make this vanish clearly miscalculated. The next morning, he drove out of the city and stopped at a quiet cafe off Highway 146. On his laptop, he opened a permissions analysis tool. One more name surfaced. Grant Wilmer, the head of software procurement. Each of his system logins traced back to a suspicious IP address, completely outside the company's known servers. He traced the IP. It pointed to a server hosted by a company called Westlake Integrated Services, a vendor he had flagged last year for invoices that didn't match delivered software. At the time, Richard told him to stop nitpicking. It was no small matter anymore. He inserted another hard drive, copied every access log, attached a detailed file on software distribution privileges. Inside was the last document he'd approved before getting locked out. The final moment he still existed on Trident's internal roadmap. His phone lit up with a message from an unknown number. "Heard you were let go. Something's wrong. I can help. Nate." Nathaniel Stone. One of the sharpest young engineers he'd ever mentored. Brilliant, observant, and most importantly, unbought by office politics. He replied, "Meet me. Garage, level 5. Old building. 7 p.m. Tell no one." The story wasn't over yet, but the pieces were beginning to align. It was no longer a theory. They didn't just remove him. They needed him erased before anyone noticed the truth behind the sterile numbers. Truth they weren't ready to face. Light rain fell as he met Nate in the garage. The kid's hoodie soaked, face shadowed. Nate handed over a hard drive in silence. Charles nodded and turned away. They'd worked together long enough to understand. What mattered now was quiet. That night he scanned Nate's data. Most of it was hidden system logs beyond ordinary clearance. One folder froze him. Purchasing_authorizations_2023. Filtering by approval name, one entry repeated. Logan Reeves, the newly promoted CFO. Charles remembered him from a past meeting, back when Logan was just a finance aide. Smooth-talking, camera-friendly, always smiling but never meeting a direct gaze. A series of transactions under Logan's name led to a company called Paramount Core Solutions. The name itself sounded harmless, but the billing address was a mailbox at a print shop near a San Antonio commercial strip. I looked up the tax ID. The business had been registered for less than 2 years, with no website, no sign of employees. What stood out was the legal representative listed. Brett Connolly. I leaned back in my chair. Brett was Logan's brother-in-law. I remembered clearly from a year-end company party. The man had sweaty palms and a handshake half a beat too slow. They had used Brett as a shield for the entire operation. Over the past year, Paramount had received over $200,000 a month from Trident. The payments were labeled Integrated System Maintenance Fees, a type of service that didn't even exist on our internal infrastructure list. In total, more than $1.6 million had been transferred in staggered amounts, small enough to avoid triggering internal audits, but too large to dismiss as coincidence. I opened Trident's invoice register and compared it with the data Nate had provided. Every payment was signed off by the finance department, but all had bypassed the three-step approval process I once designed. Logan had modified the procedure to allow temporary approval and quietly made that the default. At the time, I thought it was a glitch. Now it was obvious. Nothing about it was accidental. What was rising in my chest wasn't outrage. It was something heavier, sharper, like a scalpel. If I exposed this too soon, they'd claim it was an unrefined process, a misunderstanding. I needed a trigger point. The next day, I posed as a regular customer and called the number on Paramount's invoice. A young woman answered, saying she was a temporary assistant. When I asked about integrated maintenance services for enterprise software, she hesitated, said she'd transfer me, then hung up. 10 minutes later, the same number called back. A male voice, unfamiliar, clearly trying to stay composed. "Why are you calling Paramount?" he asked. I didn't give my name, I just said, "You provide system maintenance for Trident Systems, right?" There was a long pause. "You must have the wrong number." Then he hung up. I saved the call audio and dropped the file into the folder, alongside the invoices, business info, and tampered access rights. A clear pattern was emerging. A siphoning scheme dressed in the language of corporate procedure. I sent an encrypted email to one person, Helen Carter, former head of internal legal, who had resigned 6 months ago over philosophical differences. I asked, if there's evidence of financial fraud involving executives, who has the authority to initiate an internal investigation if the CEO remains silent? She replied, within 30 minutes. If you have solid proof, you can go directly to the board, but it has to be airtight. I launched the transaction analysis software and tagged every disbursement from Trident to Paramount over the last 10 months. Each line included contract number, approval date, signatory, and matching invoice files. I didn't need to prove the whole system was broken. I only needed to highlight a breach, big enough that those in the tower couldn't pretend they didn't see it. When night fell, I pulled the blinds, took out the hard drive, and placed it on the desk. Every click I made that night drove another nail into the lid of their carefully sealed secret. This wasn't revenge. It was a reckoning for the ones stomping over others in $1,000 suits, blind to the quiet man who had been listening all along. I created a temporary email address on a private server, routed through 2 VPN layers and encrypted end-to-end. The sender field mimicked an old testing account used during internal audits, indistinguishable from a legitimate Trident system address. On Tuesday night, I sat in a quiet diner off Interstate 10, the glow of my laptop screen cutting through dim overhead lights. At exactly 8:37 p.m., I hit send. Recipient, Logan Reeves. Subject, urgent transaction review. Request for approval, protocol audit. The message was short, nearly audit style in tone. A list of 3 payments made to Paramount Core Solutions, attached with invoice screenshots and contract codes, all accurate to the digit. No mention of Brett Connolly, no accusations, just enough to send an ice wind down Logan's spine. I didn't wait long. At 9:12 p.m., my phone buzzed, caller ID restricted. I let it go to voicemail. Charles, a low, restrained voice. You need to stop. I don't know what you're trying to prove, but if you keep going, you'll lose more than a job. No one starts an anonymous call by naming the person they're calling, but Logan's face was crystal clear in every word. I saved the voicemail and recorded it onto a separate device. Every piece mattered. People hiding the truth fear the light. I was simply cracking the door. The next morning, I received an email from what appeared to be an internal address, review@tridentsystems-finance.com. I traced the IT. It came from an offshore server sent through a domain spoofing tool. The message was brief: know when to stop. They were panicking, and when people used to control start losing grip, they make stupid decisions. By afternoon, Elaine texted, "Someone came to the door asking for you. Said he was an old friend named Rick. Want me to call the police?" I called her back immediately to reassure her, then opened the security camera feed. The man standing outside, slicked hair, gray-blue dress shirt, was Richard Nelson. He hadn't just signed off on my termination. He was Logan's fixer, the only one with clearance deep enough to alter core-level security, the same systems I had built, and they had quietly dismantled. I logged the incident, then scheduled the second email for Thursday morning. This one was going to Natalie Monroe, head of the board's independent audit committee. I'd met her during a compliance review last year. She wasn't easily manipulated. This message was different. A technical breakdown, monthly transaction patterns, recurring approval models, invoice trails, but no direct accusation. I ended the email with one line: "If you'd like to verify the source data, I can assist externally." No name, no signature, just a familiar format. She'd recognize it. I was the only one who ever structured technical memos like that. That evening, I got a message from Nate. "Richard just pulled me into a meeting, asking who's leaking internal reports." I said nothing. "They're freaking out." I replied simply, "Stay back. Don't react. Just watch." That night, I prepared phase 2. A complete report compiled from every gathered file, split into 3 distinct parts: one encrypted and stored in private cloud storage, one copied to a memory card inside a rental mailbox, one locked in the safe of a lawyer I trusted. Each included timed release instructions sent to third parties, including an investigative journalist, if I failed to respond within 72 hours after any suspicious account access. No single piece would end the game, but assembled correctly, they'd expose the entire scheme. Richard called again on Friday at noon. "You're going too far, Charles. This isn't internal anymore." I stayed silent. "We can work something out." I hung up. I didn't want a deal. I wanted truth this time, completely beyond their control. I sat in a room lit by the soft yellow glow of a corner lamp, rain whispering outside. From the third hard drive, I pulled a folder titled Archived Contracts in Active Vendors. One file stood out: Lakeside_business_solutions_consolidated SXJX. I had never seen this vendor listed in any current reports. The active period column showed operations from June 2020 to August 2022. I cross-checked the budget tracking sheet. Over $2.7 million had been allocated to this name. The expense descriptions included process consulting fees, operational risk assessment costs, and KPI measurement tool implementation. Glossy, vague terms, perfect to cover untraceable transactions. I traced the address in the records: a virtual office in Fort Worth, sharing a building with 3 multi-level marketing businesses and a massage parlor with no website. The business was registered under Clara Reeves. It took me a few minutes to confirm. Clara was Logan Reeves' wife. Paramount had been an open wound, but Lakeside was a blade that had been planted far earlier. Every piece of evidence pointed to something bigger than a lone actor. It was a layered structure, built so intricately that automated audit systems hadn't picked up a thing. I opened the remaining .pdf files in the folder. Several invoices bore approvals from Bryce Kendall, the former CFO who had retired early citing health concerns. But access logs from the security system showed the invoices were uploaded by Richard Nelson, using a temporary access ID that had been deactivated from the admin list the year before. That wasn't all. In the folder meeting_notes_internal, I found an audio file from an internal meeting I had no memory of attending. Richard's voice came through clearly. "We need to make sure Charles stays out of the new infrastructure project. He tends to dig too deep." Another voice replied, "You sure Jason can handle it?" Jason is a cleanup expert, paid to simplify. The fewer questions, the faster the rollout. Jason Brody's name had first come up when Trident announced its digital infrastructure modernization plan late last year. Everyone called him an operational transformation consultant. On paper, Jason headed a firm called Zenith Delta, but financial records revealed something else. The company had no contracts outside of Trident. I dug through old emails in my archive account. One hidden message was marked internal only. Jason's onboarding, approved fast-track vendor registration. No need for full procurement. Sender, Richard. CC, Logan. Everything had been set up before I was even pushed out of the system. I linked the scattered pieces into a connected web. Logan approved payments to 2 companies owned by relatives. Richard manipulated documents and access procedures. Jason cleared the way by restructuring the tech team, removing me as the main obstacle. No single mastermind. This was a coordinated operation running smoothly under the guise of innovation and progress. I pushed my chair back, walked to the window. The rain had stopped. Streetlights shimmered across wet pavement. I wasn't left with suspicions anymore. Just timing. Who would cry first before the board? Who would collapse before a testimony turned into an indictment? I opened my laptop and started writing the final report. No more hints. This was the complete corruption map. Evidence, screenshots, access logs, forged invoices, intermediary bank accounts. Attached to it was a single note. This is how 3 people took over $5 million from Trident without anyone noticing. Until now. I saved the file, set a password, dragged a copy onto a black USB drive, unmarked except for a single etched line. W13. My finger hovered over the upload button. Send now or wait one more day? A simple question, but the answer might shake an entire boardroom. On Monday afternoon, I arranged a meeting with the only person I believed could read all 137 pages of the report without missing a line, Robert Chen, former Chief Information Officer and longtime board member at Trident. We'd worked together on a cybersecurity audit project back in 2016. He wasn't one to follow crowds or bow to executive pressure. We met at an old coffee shop near Memorial Park. I brought a thick envelope. Inside was a printed summary of the entire scheme and a USB with all digitized data. When I set it on the table, Robert looked straight into my eyes. This is big, isn't it? I didn't nod or speak. I just slid it toward him. He flipped open the first page. By the time he reached the line showing a $3.2 million payout to a shell company registered under the CFO's wife, his finger paused. You have signature proof? I have system access logs with IDs, timestamps, IP addresses, and meeting recordings. Robert leaned back in his chair and exhaled slowly. I figured something was off, but I didn't think it was this dirty. We parted in silence. No thanks, no advice. That evening, I received a short message from him. School Finance Board meeting at 9 a.m. tomorrow. Be ready. I didn't sleep. I wrote. One email only, sent to all 12 board members and the independent audit team. The sender was an old test account I had created during a simulated cyber attack drill last year. Subject line. Before approving Q3 budget, read this. I attach the master report. Fake contracts, suspicious transactions, unauthorized system access, family connections between players, and a recorded internal conversation hinting at my strategic removal. Each piece laid out with surgical clarity, a direct blow to the board's blind trust. I scheduled the send time for 8:58 a.m. By 9:03 a.m., I was sitting in my car outside headquarters, holding a paper coffee cup, watching one black SUV after another pull in. The passengers were board members. Their glances met, tense nods were exchanged. Less than 15 minutes later, the first police cruiser arrived, then an unmarked vehicle. Federal investigators. From the lobby, Logan and Richard emerged, pale-faced. Beside them, Jason Brody, once dubbed the transformation brain, now detained by internal security. His phone had already been confiscated. Nate texted me at 9:42. All 3 have been taken into private rooms. Legal staff posted outside the doors. Office temporarily shut down. I uploaded the full report to a secure cloud vault with instructions. If any access outside the approved IP list occurred, the data would automatically go to 3 independent investigative outlets and the CIA. By late morning, Robert called. His voice was tight but satisfied. Logan confessed, named Jason as the planner. Richard admitted to cleaning files on request. The board? We suspended all 3 on the spot. Their personal assets are frozen, pending investigation. I need assurance this doesn't get buried. It won't. The FBI is involved now. That afternoon, I turned on the TV. Local finance news flashed a breaking headline. Senior Trident Systems executives under criminal investigation for organized financial fraud. No names mentioned, but footage of federal jackets and police vehicles told the whole story. Elaine sat beside me, hand resting on my shoulder, silent. I sank back into the couch, the TV's glow casting flickers on the wall, confirmation of what I'd pursued all along. Not everyone pushed out disappears. Some come back, not with noise, but with proof. And one well-timed email. 3 days after the internal hearing, a thick envelope was delivered to my home via priority courier. The delivery person said nothing, just nodded and walked away. Trident's logo was embossed on the paper and the seal read, "Confidential. For Mr. Charles Whitaker only," in wax. Inside was a formal letter from the board of directors, signed by interim chair Joanna Clark, formerly the COO, a quiet figure who had never been part of the manipulative circle. The letter began with neutral corporate language, the kind companies use when they want to acknowledge someone's efforts without setting a precedent. We appreciate your courage and professionalism in providing valuable information that helped protect the company's interests. Midway, the tone became more specific. The board has unanimously approved the creation of a new position, Chief Information Security Officer, CISO, reporting directly to the board with no executive oversight. My eyes paused at the final line. We would like you to assume this role. The benefits package and terms will be discussed directly based on your availability. I picked up the phone and called Robert. "You read it already?" he asked as soon as he picked up. I haven't responded. We don't want to lose the one person who truly understands this system. You can set your own terms. I paused. I want to meet in person, but not at headquarters. 36 hours later, I walked into a small conference room at Trident's North Huston satellite office. No banners, no press, just 6 people. 3 board members, an in-house lawyer, a senior HR representative, and a legal clerk taking minutes. I opened my briefcase and pulled out a printed packet. 5 conditions, bolded, precise, with no ambiguity. 1. Independent audit authority over the entire IT system and all digital contracts, bypassing the CEO. 2. Absolute veto power over any tech expenditure exceeding $250,000. 3. Full authority to recommend termination or removal from any project of personnel showing signs of security manipulation, with no need for public explanation. 4. A 3-year guaranteed independent budget, immune to executive adjustments. 5. No NDA restrictions concerning any misconduct identified or discovered during tenure. Joanna read each line without expression. At the 3rd condition, she looked up. What's the reason for no public's disclosure? I need my people pulled out the moment a fire starts, not after waiting for approval from someone covering for the arsonist. Robert, arms crossed, never took his eyes off the paper. When Joanna finished reading, he leaned toward her. There's a reason we brought him back, Joanna. If you don't hand someone a sword, don't expect them to defend the fortress. They discussed it for over an hour. No arguments. No one walked back a single point. As the session closed, the legal clerk asked, "We'll need a written response within 2 days. Will you?" "I'll respond in 7 hours. If everything's accepted, I'll begin restructuring oversight by Monday." As I walked out, Joanna followed a few steps behind and called quietly, "Job." I turned. "If this goes forward, you'll be the first person in company history to hold that position." I didn't come to make history. Then what for? I looked her in the eye. to make sure the people who thought they were untouchable never sleep easy again. That evening, I sent my reply, email attached with a scanned copy of my terms and a note that any unannounced change would void the offer. At 10:43 p.m., Joanna replied, "The board has approved everything. We await your next directive." I powered down the screen and rested my hand on the investigation binder. On the cover, I wrote one more line in black ink. "It's not over when you win. It's over when no one dares repeat it." 6 months after I officially assumed the role of Chief Information Security Officer, the atmosphere inside Trident was almost unrecognizable. Hallways, once silent, now buzzed with young tech teams running simulations of our next-gen access control software. The third floor, formerly a storage area, had been transformed into a secure coordination center. I named it the Signal Room, a reminder that if the system speaks up, someone's hiding something. My schedule was packed but free of internal chaos. I chose my own team, promoted Nate to lead technical operations for data layers, and personally approved every IT contract. Even expenditures just over 3 digits had to pass through the anomaly detection system I developed. A machine learning filter rebuilt by internal engineers, not outsourced. Outside Trident, the storm hadn't fully passed. Logan Reeves confessed to federal prosecutors after evidence was verified across 5 different bank accounts. He was sentenced to 4 years in prison, potentially reduced to 3 with continued cooperation. In return, he revealed the full scheme involving forged contracts and shell accounts operated under Clara's name, his wife, on paper. Richard Nelson tried to deny all involvement, but 2 recordings from internal meetings and logs tied to a fake access ID left him cornered. His preliminary hearing closed last week. The ruling: intentional sabotage of internal controls, abuse of authority, and facilitation of organized fraud. His sentencing is now in federal hands. Jason Brody, the so-called transformation expert once hailed as a tech savior, vanished from the radar just 1 day after the subpoena was issued. 3 weeks later, he was arrested at an airport in Lisbon while attempting to board a flight to Morocco using a fake passport under the name Mark Donovan. The extradition hearing is still underway, but based on the evidence, his chances of escape are next to none. I didn't waste time tracking every legal detail. Everything had already been handed over to the legal and special audit teams. My job was to ensure not a single gap remained for anyone to exploit again. Some days, I stand by the glass on the 11th floor, looking down at the parking lot where I once sat alone, hands shaking, heart hollow, after being forced out without so much as a thank you. Now, at that very spot, I had surveillance cameras installed to ensure no shadows could take root again. Occasionally, I run into people who used to avoid eye contact in the elevator. Now they smile, some even nod first. A few younger staff come up and say plainly, "Thanks for cleaning out the garbage that hung over us for so long." Those words don't make me proud. They just help me breathe a little easier. Elaine stepped into my office on a Friday afternoon while I was reviewing the monthly report. She placed a coffee beside my hand, then sat across from me as she always did. "Are you planning to take a day off next week?" "Why?" "Her daughter called. Her grad school ceremony is this weekend. She wants to know if her dad will be there." I looked up. Amidst all the chaos, I'd never forgotten my family, but I had rarely been fully present either. "I'll be there," I said. Elaine smiled. "Bring the new suit. Leave the laptop." That evening, sitting in the living room, I opened LinkedIn. The once empty profile now showed a simple status update. No need to burn bridges. Sometimes you just let them collapse under the weight of greed. Within an hour, dozens of messages poured in, from former colleagues, recruiters, even people I didn't know. They spoke of what I had done, the changes I'd made, and the courage to go against the tide. I didn't reply to them all, but I read every word. Not out of pride, but as a reminder that sometimes the strongest weapon isn't power or title. It's refusing to step back, even when they push you out of the very place you helped build. Charles's story proves that integrity, resolve, and deep knowledge can dismantle even the most untouchable systems. Removed without explanation after 17 years of service, he didn't fight back with anger, but with evidence. Once the truth came to light, those who manipulated from behind the scenes fell one by one. Charles not only reclaimed his honor, but was entrusted with even greater authority to safeguard what's right. He became a symbol of firm silence and uncompromising justice. What do you think about how Charles stood up to injustice and reclaimed justice? Share your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to follow the channel so you won't miss more real-life stories of family, betrayal, and resilience.